Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare Krishna Jai Sri Prabhupada ki Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Itinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaur Nirvesesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Desha Tarini Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Everyone may kindly repeat the following two short mantras. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Sri Surabhyaya Namaha Om Sri Surabhyaya Namaha Mukham Karoti Vasalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Pariprasnena Sevaya session. We will immediately be reading from the book speaking about Varnasrama, which is 100% compilation actually of very important instructions given by our founder Acharya on so many different aspects of society, but specifically as they deal with the scientific system of Varna and Ashrama. Especially we see in conversations, Srila Prabhupada would have either morning walk, which was one kind of conversation, or he would have room conversations, most of which were very enlivening, and devotees had opportunity to ask many questions to Srila Prabhupada. So our last chapter was actually dealing with the topic of Varna, which is a major theme, of course. And main instruction that Srila Prabhupada was giving was that Varna is meant to be established and determined by higher authority, by Guru, or as we mentioned earlier, traditionally by Brahmana. Now we go to another morning walk. This was possibly in Italy. Morning walk at Villa Borghese in 1974. Yes, in Rome. on the 25th of May, 1974. And the title of this chapter, which is chapter 11, is Grow Your Own Food. Grow Your Own Food. And some of the themes within this chapter are as follows: perform sacrifice and become self-sufficient. Actually, sacrifice means many things. We generally think of yajna, or sacrifice, in terms of homa, or fire sacrifice in a temple, where a brahmana is pouring ghee and grains and chanting mantras, and everyone is grains as well, swaha. That is one form of yajna. Of course, we know that for devotees, our primary yajna is the Sankirtan yajna. What is often less understood in terms of yajna has to do as well with our prescribed duties. That is also yajna, because yajna ultimately means what is meant to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, yajna. So that means that actually not only the chanting of the holy name is pleasing to the Lord, because by chanting the holy name we glorify the Lord. Not only is performance of homa, or fire sacrifice, also pleasing to the Lord, because in all performances of yajna we chant mantras, we glorify as well the Lord and His many associates and devotees. And the performance of prescribed duties is also a yajna, because all of our activities in the material world are meant to be performed for the pleasure and satisfaction of the Lord. We have forgotten this in modern day society, especially because we have removed the primary focus or aim of life, which is to actually connect with the Supreme. So a few other themes here. King grants land. So this, the Vedic system, kings would grant land. One would have land without purchasing the land, because the land belonged to the to the king. Taxes are in kind. So one doesn't pay by money, but one pays by whatever one is able to produce, and some percentage of our products. Number 3, paper currency versus barter system. Modern mismanagement, Krishna conscious solutions. Another theme, stick to your own place and grow your food. I mean, this is again and again coming in various conversations. And the last, petroleum-powered transport means bulls sent to slaughterhouse. Yes. So the more we rely on various kinds of machines that are propelled by petroleum, oil, gas, whatever, that means we make less use or find less use for bulls, and therefore we send them to the slaughterhouse. So some excerpt here from the conversation. One devotee is asking, why is it that the rains come in certain parts of the world and other parts people do not have enough? Prabhupada replies, no, no part of the world is nowadays sufficient rain. So Prabhupada is immediately making the point, actually, nowhere is there sufficient rainfall. And he explains why. Because they are not performing yajna. Sometimes it is seen that over-rain, over-flood, not systematic. This is the beauty of the Vedic culture when we follow the prescribed regulations that are given. Then when our lives also are regulated, when we rise early, Vedic culture is very strongly advocating that one should rise early. Early to bed, early to rise, as the saying goes. And in this way, when our lives are regulated, then the seasons will also automatically be regulated, and that means that rains will come at the proper time. But if you perform yajna, yes, so yajna in terms of our activities, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, there will be systematic rainfall, which you can utilize properly. Jagyad bhavati parjanya. Rains are produced by performance of yajna. So nowadays, these three yajnas, the fire yajna, the chanting of the holy name, and the performance of activities for the pleasure and satisfaction of Krishna. These three activities are practically not being performed, and therefore there is so much of irregularity. Then one devotee is telling, Kirtananda Swami says that in New Vrindavan the weather is changing every year. It is getting nicer there, much more sun, and the winter is not so hard. Atreya Rishi, another devotee. In New Vrindavan, it's getting better. Prabhupada. Yes, because there are so many devotees. The people are still being maintained on account of our chanting Hare Krishna. Very important point. The people are still being maintained on account of our chanting Hare Krishna. So that's why again and again Srila Prabhupada would emphasize the importance of chanting the holy name as being the basis of success for actually all of our activities. It is not simply a matter of performing material things. The basis of all of these activities needs to be the chanting of the holy name. And by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, and of course by the mercy of our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada, this chanting of the holy name is now being introduced, has been introduced in so many countries all over the world. And in many ways, this is what is sustaining, what is helping the world situation to be less catastrophic than it is at present. There's a few more lines from this section here. One devotee is answering, yes, by the grace of the pure devotee, of course. All of the activities of the Krishna consciousness movement are made possible, have been made possible, and continue to be made possible, especially by the grace and the mercy of our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada here is speaking, encouraging in our society to take to agriculture to support this center. I am purchasing land in Vrindavan and Mayapur to become self-sufficient. Whatever production you make, you be satisfied. There's an axiom actually, or a maxim rather. There's a maxim whereby, although very short statements, but they are very deep in their meaning. Produce only what you need. Produce only what you need, which is not the case in modern day agriculture. We produce excess. Practically speaking, whatever we produce, we sell. So Vedic norm, Vedic standard is produce only what you need. And secondly, use only what you produce. How many people are doing that? Even in those who are farming, very few people. But actually that is meant to be the ideal. Be satisfied. Here, Papa is reminding us here. Whatever production you make, you be satisfied. If we don't have Krishna consciousness, we cannot be satisfied. If we have Krishna consciousness, only then we can actually be satisfied. Little vegetable, little grain, little milk, that is sufficient. So one devotee is asking, in the Vedic culture, was the land divided in the sense that some people would receive land free, or Prabhupada replies, land belongs to the king, and you take land for cultivation, and you pay 25% tax to the king. That's all. All taxes. If you don't produce, then you don't pay any tax. Vedic is based on very simplified principles, simplified concepts. Then the devotee answering or replying, oh, it wasn't forced that you had to pay so much? Prabhupada, no. You pay 25% of what you have produced. Then Prabhupada, everyone was engaged in producing. There was no necessity. And here the rascals are advising produce bolts and nuts, tire and drill petrol. They are not producing food. And the so-called government men, they are levying taxes and they are enjoying. They haven't got to produce food. They're killing animals, eating and digesting with wine. And then women, that's all. This is their business. And food price is increasing daily. They don't mind because they will print paper. And to the supplier, they will give paper. That's all. So this is the beginning of this conversation on the topic of food. We can now go to our questions. We'd like to thank Rasamandal Prabhu for continuing to send some questions. So we were at question 43. Today, question number 44 from Pune, from Radhaduti. Radhaduti Devidasi. Recently, while reading from the book speaking about Varnasrama that we are reading every day, Your Holiness mentioned that a Varnasrama college is meant for Brahman, Kshatriya and Vaishya. Why is it not meant for Shudras? If it is offensive to categorize a devotee among Shudras, does that mean a devotee village community won't have any Shudras? I see two questions in one here, but related, so we're taking it all together. Actually, the Varnashram College is meant for all of the varnas, but especially for the brahmanas and kshatriyas, and the vaishyas maybe to a lesser extent. We need to understand how in the Vedic culture the standard educational system, especially as we were explaining the other day, there's two types of education. More formal education, which was primarily for the dvijas, that means Brahmana, Kshatriya and Vaishya. And the other type of education, non-formal education, which was for the rest of the population, who would be engaged in different kinds of manual work, manual activities. So it also means that those who will be brahmanas, their time to study, their years of study will be more than the kshatriyas and vaishyas. Also because the activity of Shudra is mostly out in performing different activities in connection with agriculture. Therefore, a lot of his education will be outside, not in a classroom kind of setting. There can be initially, and should be also, basic learning of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So this is necessary for all members within society. And this we can easily understand also when we read the 7th canto. And again, I want to urge our devotees, especially householders, to read those 5 chapters as spoken by Narada Muni to Yudhishthira Maharaj. And at the very beginning, the very first of those 5 chapters, which is chapter 11, Narada Muni explains how those persons in society who are meant to be or who will become part of the system of Varnasrama, from down to Shudra, all of the 4 categories, they should learn to develop 30 human qualities, 30 qualities that identify them or qualify them, we can say, as human beings. Although in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna refers to one main quality for Shudra, which is seva, service. In the Bhagavatam, in this section, Narada Muni refers to 9 qualities that a Shudra needs to develop. 2 of those qualities are part of these 30 qualities mentioned in the 7th canto. One of them being satyam, truthfulness. Means from the Brahmana down to the Shudra, this quality of truthfulness must be there. It is not that, well, I'm not a Brahmana, I don't have to be truthful. No. A Kshatriya has to be very truthful, a Vaishya as well, and a Shudra. And second important quality for Shudra, and of course for all the other members within the Varnasrama system, is Shaucham, cleanliness. External cleanliness as well as internal cleanliness. Internal cleanliness has to do with purified consciousness, which comes by hearing and chanting, Shravanam Kirtanam. And external cleanliness by bathing on a regular basis, by wearing clean cloth every day, by keeping our surrounding, our home neat and clean, and in this way, that quality of cleanliness. So, the second part of your question, will there be Shudras in the, let's say, a Vaishnava community? A Vaishnava community is made up of all of the four Varnas. Our problem is that in the same way that we have given a negative connotation to the word Varnasrama, naturally we have also given a negative connotation to the word Shudra. We think of Shudra as being very negative, very bad. But actually, Shudra, a qualified Shudra, is one who understands his position of being dependent on other members of society, such as the Brahmana, Kshatriya and Vaishya. Natural dependency, because the Shudra is one who cannot do things well on his own, needs to be under the guidance and the care and the protection of other members of society. So therefore, see, there are, when we say guna and karma, as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, so Varna is determined by guna and karma. It's a very important point to understand. Guna for someone who is not a devotee, guna, quality, for someone who is not a devotee, is under the influence of the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, ignorance, or a mixture, and changing, constantly changing, although generally one is predominant. For Brahmana it will be goodness, for Shudra it will be ignorance, and in between. So for one who is not a devotee, the guna is this interaction of the modes of material nature. And the karma will be also based on these, the influence of these modes of material nature. Yeah. Whereby we understand that someone who's Shudra will be more inclined to perform manual activities, as opposed to someone who is more intellectual, a Brahmana. So that is for someone who is on the bodily platform, who is under the influence of the modes of material nature. Now for a devotee, something very important changes. The karma, the activity, external activity may be, not only maybe, will be the same as we find described for Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, but the guna, the quality of one's mind or the mentality will be that of a practicing devotee. So to the extent that one is applying the process of Krishna consciousness, one will be less and less influenced by the modes of material nature. And therefore, because of developing a higher consciousness, a devotee will still perform activities according to natural tendencies, but all of those activities will be performed in a higher consciousness for the pleasure and satisfaction of Krishna. And Prabhupada, in other places, the question would be asked, well, what is the breakdown, so to speak, in society? What percentage are Brahmanas? What percentage are Kshatriyas, etc.? Srila Prabhupada would explain, and we can also understand very easily, that the vast majority of people fall within the category of Shudra. So therefore, in any community, of course, there may be variety. Just like in India, we find a village, a Brahmana village, Shantipur. Advaita Acharya, he was living in a place where it was primarily Brahmanas. That is why the name of the village is Pura, Shantipura. That place where there is Shanti, peace of mind, that is possible only by elevated consciousness, means by Brahmanas. Of course, one interesting question will be coming up. It's not simply because one is a Brahmana. To actually, than even being a Brahmana is being a Krishna conscious Brahmana, is being a Vaishnava Brahmana. One may be a Brahmana, one may be a Kshatriya, but if one is not a Vaishnava, then one's consciousness will be of a different nature. So just to conclude on this point, it means that in Vaishnava communities, just like even now, if we look in our temples, there are different activities for different devotees. Not everyone can be in charge of a temple. Not so easy to manage a temple. Managing in a temple means managing people. Kali Yuga is not so easy to work with people. Practically everyone is on the mental platform. Most of us before, vast majority of us before coming to Krishna consciousness, we're totally on the bodily and mental platform. So even within our city temples, there are these differences are there, and they become more easily, we could say, applied within a more natural surrounding, let's say, as in a village where one is having to take up all kinds of activities which may not necessarily be there in a temple, city temple. Let us go to another question here. Question number 45. This is a question from a devotee in Hyderabad, Vamsuli Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Question: what specific actions should devotees take to prepare better for entering life in a self-sufficient spiritual community, especially considering the following? And there are two considerations here that are mentioned. One, the current economy could fall apart any day now. And secondly, we are unable to cultivate sufficient trust in the viability of existing communities. So the question is, what specific actions should devotees take up or take to prepare to better prepare for entering life in a self-sufficient spiritual community? One of the most important preparations for a devotee is to be a devotee, is to be a fixed up devotee, is to be a regulated devotee, to be strong in one's sadhana. Because naturally, to make this kind of shift and to take up a lifestyle which for most of us is alien, because we've not been brought up in that kind of environment, therefore there will be specific challenges. Definitely there will be challenges. So the stronger we are in our practice of Krishna consciousness, then this will go a long way to help us deal with the different challenges that will be there. So that's, I would say, the preliminary and most important preparation for a devotee. Secondly, one should study our Shastra to understand what makes up this kind of lifestyle in a village where one's life is more simple and where one has to deal with Mother Nature much more than we do living in the city, for example, and where we will not be depending on a salary that is coming at the end of the month. You know, the vast majority of people who are working at some job are totally dependent on this paycheck that is coming at the end of the month. So life in a self-sufficient community is very different, because one has to depend and rely on what will be coming from the land or from one's activities in relation to the land, isn't it? So therefore, it is important for devotees to learn, to read about village life, to hear the various explanations that Srila Prabhupada, you know, in various conversations, he speaks about village organization. There are many books actually that refer, one can learn many things simply by reading about village life, either in our Shastra or as described in other books that give basic information of how people lived and how they were making a living. Actually, there are many very detailed books, because quite some years back, actually going back even in the 60s and 70s, there was the movement. There was a movement that has continued actually to this day, of people who one catalog, whole earth catalog, was a very famous catalog that was very popular amongst the hippies in the West at that time. This is 60s and 70s. And all kinds of detailed information on how to live based on nature, based on simple technology or soft technology. So we may think that this is going so far away actually from what we are accustomed to. But we need to understand that what we are accustomed to is very, very far removed from what is meant to be the norm in society. That's why we need to hear from Brahmanas. We need to hear from our foremost Brahmana, that means Srila Prabhupada, who could see through everything. Just like when Prabhupada would speak about finances or the whole, we could say, artificial paper currency system that is in place, and how dangerous and very artificial this system is. In so many ways, Srila Prabhupada, he could clearly see through all of the false, we could say, arrangement that has been made over the last so many decades simply for the purpose of increasing our so-called material well-being or material satisfaction, because primarily that is the goal and objective for the vast majority of people. And that is the motto, isn't it? What is the mantra, for the vast majority of leaders in the world? Through economic development, we will be able to provide all of the material necessities for people, and in this way, people will be happy. This is often referred to as the American dream. But actually, that is a false dream. We cannot be happy in this way, and especially if we look at what we have done in the last so many decades. We have been extremely destructive to the environment. We have been destructive to the whole concept of family life as well. So many problems we have created actually by having people forced to work under very uncongenial circumstances. Prabhupada speaks about factory work, for example. All of these things go against the way we are meant to live in a more simplified environment, and maintaining good relationship with one another, which is, relationships nowadays, even within families, are very much broken. The whole concept of the family nucleus is practically destroyed. So many anomalies, so many irregularities have come about due to all kinds of malpractices. And what may seem to be, we may not have so much faith. This is what you're mentioning here. We are unable to cultivate sufficient trust in the viability of existing communities. We don't have that many communities, it is a fact. And many of our communities in many ways are still having quite some ways to go before attaining that level of full self-sufficiency or sustainability. However, we should understand that many of these communities are making some, I would say, very real progress in that direction. It is still a learning process for the vast majority of our devotees. One very important factor that needs to be kept in mind: either we trust and believe the words of our Shastra, either we trust and believe the words of our Acharyas, either we trust and believe the words of our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, who again and again explain the benefits of living this kind of lifestyle. We have become so spoiled in living this modern way of life. We take so many things for granted. And therefore, what is taking place around the world today, we should see it as a wake-up call to more deeply, more closely look at, more deeply understand the truth behind these different descriptions and instructions given actually by our founder Acharya, given throughout our Vedic literatures as well. So therefore, we need to become more convinced by hearing from the Shastra. We need to also become physically, intellectually, and spiritually involved with these communities, and there are successful communities, both within ISKCON as a society and outside, and therefore we can take lessons from those communities that are more advanced in attaining that level of self-sufficiency and sustainability. So it's very important. Of course, it is such a drastic change. It's a completely different outlook, and therefore initially it's natural that we will have reservations or doubts about this. We have to be, it's like, going back home, back to Godhead is also not a simple thing. And for many it may seem like an impossible task. And actually, by our own endeavor, it is impossible. But if we firmly take the good instructions that are given, that are there and given by Guru, by Shastra, and also repeated by saintly persons, then we can begin to make progress in that main activity of life, actually, main goal of life, of becoming qualified to one day go back to the spiritual world. So in many ways, it's like, going back to the spiritual world means going back to Goloka. Goloka means that place where there are unlimited cows, and the main activity is to is village life, actually, village lifestyle. So therefore, in the same way that ultimately to develop a relationship with Krishna, we need to develop our relationship with Guru. We need to develop our relationship with Vaishnavas, and it's not easy. But if we cannot succeed in properly developing relationship with Guru and Vaishnavas, we can never hope to develop a relationship with Krishna. In a similar way, if we cannot develop what is meant to be the natural system of living by being in harmony with nature, if we cannot come to appreciate, not only to appreciate, but to live the standard Vedic norm of village life, that is the Vedic norm, agrarian life, agrarian lifestyle, how we can expect to go back to the spiritual world? If we cannot develop our attraction for cows and a service attitude for cows and all living entities as well, then how we can expect to go back to the spiritual world? So these are means by which it will be demonstrated how we factually understand this philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So just to close on this point, we have the highest philosophy. We have the most complete philosophy, the most ancient culture, the eternal culture. It's Sanatan Dharma, the eternal culture, which is eternally based on this principle for those who are in the material world of Varna and Asrama. And therefore, we must come to this position of understanding, not only understanding, the main point is that our philosophy, we we can refer to that basic understanding as jnanam. Jnanam means knowledge, but it is not sufficient simply to cultivate knowledge. And that is why this very nice instruction, very nice verse that we find in the Bhagavatam, whereby it's explaining that when one is fortunate to come to the mode of goodness, one comes to the mode of goodness by being very strict in following the 4 rules and regulations. That is the level of prasanatma. Brahma bhuta prasanatma na sochati na kanchati. No anxiety. Anxiety means Shudra. Anxiety means Shudra mentality. You see. So in the Bhagavatam, evam prasanna manaso, when one actually rises above the mode of goodness, the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance, and rises, comes, and steadily becomes fixed in the mode of goodness, evam prasanna manaso, then the mind becomes satisfied, peaceful. Then with a peaceful, satisfied mind, what happens? Evam prasanna manaso bhagavat bhakti yogata. One can engage in activities of bhakti, devotional service. And those activities of bhakti, devotional service will be pleasing to Krishna, because all those activities are meant for his pleasure, for his satisfaction. Krishna being pleased upon such a person who is fixed in the mode of goodness, who is strong in his sadhana, who is nicely engaged in activities of bhakti, devotional service, then what happens? Bhagavat tattva vijnanam. Bhagavat tattva vijnanam. Not only is there knowledge, so many people have knowledge, but for a devotee, there must be vijnanam. Vijnanam means realized knowledge, applied knowledge. Our philosophy can only be, we could say, properly understood or mature. We become mature in our philosophy when we are able to apply day-to-day life, not only in terms of chanting Hare Krishna, not only in terms of rising early and attending Mangalarti, but in the matter of living the lifestyle that Krishna himself lived in Vrindavan. It always comes back to this point. And we find it difficult. Why? Because we're so far removed, so far away from that norm. And we think that it's, we've gone so much to this extreme that we cannot appreciate, we cannot understand, and we cannot immediately, naturally, we cannot immediately apply or follow that lifestyle. Therefore, we must ado shraddha, isn't it? This shraddha or faith means conviction, needs to be there on both of these levels. Conviction on the spiritual process that Krishna is giving us, the spiritual process. There's so many different spiritual processes, but the topmost spiritual process, the topmost yoga, the topmost levels of self-realization, isn't it, is Bhagavad Dharma, the science of Bhagavan, not only Brahman, not only Paramatma, Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti sabjate, that is the highest level of realization. Similarly, we must also be understanding and living this other level of varnashrama dharma. Both are meant to be there in society. Otherwise, we are living on cloud 9. We are not being realistic. And with this kind of consciousness, we are unknowingly, largely, sometimes knowingly also, allowing all kinds of inconsistencies, all kinds of irregularities, all kinds of imbalances, all kinds of manipulation, all kinds of exploitation to be happening or to take place around us. It's a very big topic. So therefore we need to increase our conviction that what is mentioned, especially in this particular book, speaking about varnasrama, are words spoken by our founder Acharya because he felt it was important for us to understand and to live according to these principles. So I think we are close to the end of our session today. Again, thank you all very much for attending this program. Please send in other questions, and we request everyone to, especially in these times, it is even more important whenever there are main challenges and obstacles, then these are different tests for all of us, and therefore it is very important for us to become or to be stronger in our practice of Krishna consciousness. In this way we will be able to become more instrumental in helping deal or tackle with the various challenges that are there. So thank you all very much. Let us together chant 3 times the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Samasta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Pimanandi, Hare Krishna.